Chapter 1. The wedding she never wanted. The bells of Harcourt Hall tolled like a death knell. Each note echoed through the marble corridors, reverberating off portraits of ancestors who stared down from their gilded frames with silent judgment. Outside, the spring air was heavy with mist, the kind that blurred the edges of the gardens and made the roses appear like ghosts. Inside, the air smelled of lilacs, beeswax, and fear. Lady Evelina Harcourt sat before her mirror, staring at the reflection of a stranger in white. Her gown shimmered faintly beneath the candlelight, ivory silk embroidered with silver thread, a masterpiece crafted for a duchess. A diamond tiara crowned her dark chestnut curls. The veil, sheer as frost, trembled with every uneven breath she took. Her maid, a small, freckled woman named Martha, fussed nervously with the train. "You're the picture of grace, my lady," Martha whispered, her voice trembling as if she, too, could feel the suffocating weight of what was about to happen. "Lord Langston will be the proudest man in England when he sees you." Evelina's lips curved faintly, though the smile never reached her eyes. "Yes," she murmured, voice hollow, "the proudest man in England. And she, the unhappiest bride." She turned from the mirror, pressing her trembling hands against her lap to still them. Her heart was beating too fast, not from excitement nor joy, but from terror. Every instinct inside her screamed to flee, to tear the gown from her body and escape before it was too late. But there was nowhere to go, not yet. From beyond the chamber doors came the rustle of silk skirts, the echo of male laughter, the faint, solemn strains of the string quartet warming up in the chapel below. The world was preparing for her wedding. Every guest from London society had arrived. The Harcourts could afford no scandal, no hesitation, no mistake. She was to marry Lord Henry Langston, heir to the Duke of Ravenshire, a man of immense fortune, power, and polished cruelty. Evelina had known him since childhood. He had been her father's chosen ally, the one who had rescued the Harcourt family from financial ruin with a single proposal. To the world, it was the perfect match: beauty and wealth, nobility and influence, duty and ambition. But to Evelina, it was a sentence, because once, long ago, she had loved another, and though years had passed, though every letter, every dream, every tear had been buried deep beneath her father's commands, that love still burned quietly inside her, like an ember refusing to die. She reached for the locket at her throat, gold, delicate and worn from years of secret touch. Inside was a small sketch of a man's face, strong, handsome, with eyes the colour of storm clouds. Gabriel Ashford, Viscount of Thornfield, the man she had rejected, the man she had betrayed. A knock at the door startled her. Her father's voice followed, deep, commanding, and void of affection. "Evelina, it is time." She rose, her gown whispering across the polished floor like a sigh. "Yes, father," she answered, forcing steadiness into her tone. Sir Charles Harcourt entered, tall and silver-haired, his blue eyes sharp as flint. His attire was immaculate, every detail a display of pride. Yet beneath that elegance was the same cold ruthlessness that had guided his every decision, including the one that had stolen his daughter's freedom. "You look perfect," he said curtly. "Langston's carriage arrived an hour ago. The ceremony begins in 20 minutes. You will walk with dignity, with grace, and without hesitation. Do you understand me?" Evelina nodded faintly. "I understand." He studied her for a long moment, perhaps searching for rebellion in her gaze. Finding none, at least none he could see, he offered his arm. "Then let us go, my dear." The chapel of Harcourt Hall was breathtaking that morning. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, scattering shards of color across the marble aisle. Guests whispered behind lace fans and polished canes as the orchestra played softly. The scent of roses and incense filled the air. Lord Henry Langston waited at the altar, his tall frame resplendent in black and silver. His expression was one of practiced serenity, but his eyes, those calculating grey eyes, followed Evelina's every step with a kind of ownership that made her skin crawl. She tried not to meet his gaze. Each step forward felt heavier than the last. The rustle of her gown, the hush of the congregation, it was all too loud, too real. Her throat tightened, the walls seemed to close in, her vision blurring as her pulse thundered in her ears. Then, through the haze, she thought she saw him, a figure near the back pew, dark hair, familiar posture, the faintest trace of a scar along his jawline. Gabriel, her heart stopped. No, it couldn't be. It couldn't be him. He was gone, exiled to the north, they said. He had left England after her rejection, after she had written that dreadful letter dictated by her father's hand. But as she glanced again, the pew was empty, just her imagination, cruel hope playing its last trick. The priest's voice droned on. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." She barely heard him. Her vision swam, her chest constricted. Every instinct inside her screamed the same word over and over. "Run!" The priest's voice came again. "Lady Evelina Harcourt, do you take this man?" And she could not breathe. She turned to look at Henry Langston. His smile was thin, predatory. A warning flickered in his eyes. "Don't you dare." Behind him, her father's stare was ice. Evelina's hands trembled. Her voice failed. The sound cracked in her throat. Henry leaned forward slightly, whispering through clenched teeth, "Say it." But in that moment, something inside her broke. The years of obedience, the silence, the shame, all of it shattered in a single heartbeat. She dropped the bouquet. The flowers scattered like falling snow across the marble floor. And then she ran. Gasps filled the chapel. The orchestra faltered. The priest's voice called out in confusion, but Evelina didn't hear. She fled through the side door, her slippers slipping on polished stone, her veil tearing against a pillar as she burst into the misty courtyard. Outside, the air was cold and alive. She gathered her skirts and ran faster, past the carriages, past the shocked servants, through the rose garden where dew clung to her gown. Her lungs burned, her heart pounded, her tears blurred everything into color and motion. Behind her, voices shouted her name. She didn't look back. Down the hill, through the orchard, she ran until the chapel bells faded behind her, and only the sound of wind and her own sobs remained. By the time she reached the forest, the sky had darkened. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Her satin slippers were soaked, her gown torn, her tiara long gone. But still she ran, away from the vows, the lies, the life her father demanded. She didn't know where she was going, only that she could not stop. Hours passed. The sky opened, releasing a sudden downpour. Rain drenched her hair, clung to her lashes, soaked through silk and bone. She stumbled through mud and brambles, her once perfect gown now a tattered memory of the woman she was meant to be. At last, exhaustion claimed her. She collapsed against a tree, chest heaving, rain mingling with tears. "What have I done?" she whispered into the storm. The wind howled in reply. Her thoughts spun. She had ruined herself. Her father would disown her. Society would condemn her. There would be no returning now. She had traded everything: status, security, reputation, for a freedom she didn't know how to live. But deep within the fear, beneath the trembling and the cold, was something else: relief. For the first time in years, her choices were her own. When lightning flashed, it illuminated a faint glimmer ahead, a river cutting through the trees. She stumbled toward it, desperate for shelter, for warmth, for anywhere to rest. As she neared the riverbank, she saw it, a small hunting cabin, its chimney faintly smoking, tucked beneath the shelter of tall oaks. Hope flickered in her chest. She dragged herself across the mud and rapped weakly on the wooden door. "Please," she gasped. "Someone." The door opened before she could finish, and there he was, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a weather-worn coat and a look of pure disbelief. Rain dripped from his dark hair, his grey eyes wide with shock. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. "Evelina?" His voice was low, rough, hoarse with disbelief. "God in heaven, is it really you?" She froze, her lips parted, her breath catching. "Gabriel." He stepped closer, the lamplight catching the scar along his jaw, a remnant of the duel fought the night she ended. Their engagement. His expression hardened, though his eyes betrayed the chaos beneath. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "In that gown? You look—" She swayed, too cold, too weak to answer. I ran." Before she could say more, her knees gave way. Gabriel lunged forward, catching her just before she hit the floor. "Evelina!" Her vision blurred, his voice fading into the rush of rain and the pounding of her heart. "I couldn't do it," she whispered faintly. "I couldn't marry him." Then everything went black. When she awoke, the world was quiet again. She lay upon a rough-hewn bed, wrapped in a woolen blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. The fire crackled nearby, casting shadows on the walls. Her head throbbed faintly, and her throat ached from the cold. Then she heard movement, the sound of boots, the creak of wood. Gabriel stood near the fire, his back to her. The storm had passed, but the tension in the room felt heavier than before. For a long moment, she simply watched him, the steady rise and fall of his shoulders, the quiet strength that time had carved into him. He turned at last, his expression unreadable. "So," he said quietly, "you ran from your wedding." Her voice trembled. You knew?" He gave a humorless smile. "Half the county knows by now. Word travels faster than rain." She lowered her eyes, shame washing over her. "I didn't plan it. I just couldn't." Gabriel crossed the room, each step deliberate. "You couldn't marry him, or you wouldn't?" She looked up, meeting his gaze. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." The air between them thickened, years of pain and silence pressing close. "I thought you were gone," she whispered, "that you'd left England forever." "I tried," he said softly, "but some ghosts don't stay buried." Her breath caught. "You mean me?" His jaw clenched. "You were never a ghost, Evelina. You were the wound that never healed." The words cut through her, sharp and unguarded. She wanted to speak, to explain, but the memory of her father's threats, the forged letter, the cruel deceit, they all rose like chains around her throat. "Gabriel, I never meant." He turned away, voice low. "Don't." Not tonight. Rest. You're safe here for now." And with that he moved to the window, staring out into the dark. Evelina watched him, her heart twisting. Once she had dreamed of this man as her husband. Now fate had brought her to his door in ruin and disgrace. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. Inside, two hearts, once entwined, then torn apart, beat in the same room again. Neither spoke, but in the quiet between them, something stirred. An old ache, an unfinished story, and though neither dared name it, both knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. The Man by the River. When dawn broke over the woods, it came shyly, thin light filtering through grey clouds, turning the river into a ribbon of silver. A mist still clung to the ground, wrapping the small cabin in a quiet veil. Inside, the world was still. Evelina stirred beneath the heavy wool blanket. For a moment she forgot everything. The wedding, the rain, the running, the fire had burned low, its warmth gentle against her skin. Then she opened her eyes and remembered where she was and who was standing across the room. Gabriel Ashford. He was at the table by the window, sleeves rolled to his forearms, tending to a pot of steaming tea. The early light caught his profile, sharp and strong, the same as she remembered, though older now, more weathered. Time had carved a certain stillness into him, the kind that comes only from loss. He turned as she shifted, his grey eyes meeting hers. "You're awake." His voice was deep, calm, but something in it trembled faintly, as if he'd spent the night wrestling ghosts of his own. Evelina pushed herself up slowly, wincing at the stiffness in her limbs. How long was I asleep? Since last night. You fainted." He poured tea into a chipped cup and brought it to her. "Drink. You're lucky you didn't freeze to death." She accepted the cup with shaking hands. "Thank you." For a while, there was only silence, the sound of the river outside, the creak of the cabin's beams, the fire's gentle hiss. It was an awkward silence, thick with years of unsaid words. Finally she spoke. "I never thought I'd see you again." He gave a short, mirthless laugh. "Nor I you. Especially not dressed like that." Her gaze dropped to the edge of her gown, mud-stained and torn, its once gleaming silk dulled by the forest. "It seems the world finds me a fool." Gabriel's eyes softened slightly. "No, not a fool, just brave at the wrong time." That stung more than it should have. "And what would you have done, Gabriel? You of all people should understand. My father, he left me no choice." He turned away, jaw tightening. "You always had a choice. You just chose him." "I didn't." The words came out sharper than she intended. "You think I wanted that marriage? That I—" She broke off, her voice trembling. "You don't know what he threatened me with." Gabriel faced her again, eyes dark. "Then tell me, after all these years, tell me why you sent that letter. The one that said you never loved me, that you were marrying Langston because I wasn't enough." Her breath caught. The memory of that letter, his letter, rewritten by her father's hand, burned like fire. "I didn't write those words," she whispered. "I swear it. My father dictated them. He said if I refused, he would have you ruined. Debts, forged evidence. He had the means. I couldn't let him destroy you." For a moment he said nothing. Then he exhaled sharply, turning back toward the window. "So you sacrificed yourself." "It wasn't sacrifice," she said softly. "It was survival." Gabriel was silent for a long while. Outside, a bird called across the misty river, its song cutting through the tension like a thread of light. At last he said, "You could have told me. I tried, she said, her voice trembling. I wrote to you dozens of letters, but none ever reached you. He turned sharply. I never received a single one. She frowned. Then someone intercepted them. He laughed bitterly. Of course they did. Your father made certain the poor soldier wasn't good enough for his daughter. Evelina flinched. You were never poor. I was, by his standards. Gabriel's gaze hardened. You know what he called me? An opportunist, a common soldier playing at nobility. And perhaps I was, but I loved you, Evelina. God help me, I loved you. The room felt smaller then, the air charged. Her eyes filled, tears threatening to spill. And I loved you, Gabriel. She stopped herself, pressing a trembling hand to her mouth. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to the fire. Don't, he said quietly. Don't say things you don't mean. Not after all this time. She wanted to protest, but the weight of his words silenced her. He was right in a way. She had no right to speak of love, not after the ruin she had made of both their lives. The hours passed in uneasy quiet. Gabriel tended to the small hearth, chopping wood, moving with the careful precision of a man used to solitude. Evelina sat near the fire, sipping her tea, her gaze drifting over the small cabin, rough wooden walls, a worn chair, a rifle over the mantel, and books stacked neatly in one corner. It was a simple life, but every inch of it bore his mark. How long have you lived here? She asked softly. 2 years, he replied without looking up. After I left London, I couldn't stomach society any longer. Too many reminders, too many whispers. She nodded slowly. And your title, Thornfield? He shrugged. Still mine, though I've little use for it now. The estate manages itself. I come here when I want quiet. Or to hide, she said gently. He looked up, eyes narrowing. And what would you know of hiding? Evelina met his gaze, her chin lifting. Enough. I've been hiding behind obedience for years. He held her eyes for a long, unspoken moment, until something in his expression softened. You always did have fire in you, he murmured. She gave a faint, sad smile. And you always said it would burn me alive. Seems I was right. She laughed softly despite herself. The sound surprised them both. For a fleeting instant, the years between them seemed to dissolve. The bitterness, the silence, the pain. There was only the warmth of the fire and two people who once knew each other better than anyone else in the world. But then reality returned. Gabriel's expression hardened again. You can't stay here long. Langston will send men after you. I know. Evelina looked down at her hands. I needed a moment to think, to breathe. You'll have that, he said quietly. But when the road's clear, I'll take you to the next village. There's an inn where you'll be safe. Her heart twisted at the distance in his tone. You want me gone that quickly? I don't want trouble. Or you don't want me, she whispered. He looked away. It's not that simple. It never was, she said softly. By midday, the rain had eased. Gabriel stepped outside to chop wood, the rhythmic thud of the axe echoing through the clearing. Evelina watched from the window, her heart aching at the sight of him. Broad shoulders, strong hands, the sure movement of someone who had built his own life from ruin. He looked both familiar and changed. The boyish charm she'd once known was gone, replaced by something harder, lonelier. When he came back in, his hair damp from the mist. He paused by the doorway. "There's stew on the fire," he said. "Eat while it's hot." She nodded, rising to serve herself. The stew was simple but comforting. Carrots, potatoes, venison, the flavors earthy and warm. For a while they ate in silence. Then Gabriel spoke again, voice quieter now. "So what will you do once you leave here?" Evelina stared into her bowl. "I don't know. I've never had a life that was truly mine. I suppose I'll have to start one." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "You'll have no fortune, no protection. Your father will cut you off entirely. Then I'll live without it. You've never lived without it." She met his gaze, steady. "There's a first time for everything." Gabriel sighed, rubbing a hand across his face. "You always did have a way of making impossible things sound simple, because you always believed they were." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment the walls between them seemed to falter. "Tell me something," he said quietly. "If your father hadn't interfered, if none of it had happened, would you have married me?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Yes." He inhaled sharply, as if the word itself had struck him. Silence filled the room again, heavy and charged. Evelina could feel her pulse in her throat, her skin warming despite the cool air. Then Gabriel stood abruptly, breaking the spell. "You should rest. I'll sleep outside tonight." She rose quickly. "No, please. I couldn't." "It's fine," he said firmly. "I'm used to discomfort." He reached for his coat, but she stepped closer, her hand brushing his sleeve. "Gabriel, don't go. Not tonight. I don't want to be alone." He froze at her touch. For a long, fragile heartbeat, neither moved. Then he gently pulled his arm away. "You'll be safe here," and he walked out into the mist. Evelina stood there, the echo of his presence lingering in the room. Her heart ached, not from rejection, but from the knowledge that he was fighting something just as fiercely as she was. Outside, she could see him by the river, standing beneath the pale sky, staring at the water as if searching for answers he could never say aloud. She pressed a hand to her heart, whispering into the quiet, "You still have mine, Gabriel. You always did." That night, sleep came slowly. The storm had passed, but inside the cabin, her thoughts raged like wind. Each memory of him, each laugh, each stolen kiss, each dream they'd once shared, returned with merciless clarity. She had thought time would dull it. Instead, it had only sharpened the ache. When the door creaked softly sometime past midnight, she sat up. Gabriel entered quietly, carrying his coat, his expression unreadable. "It's cold outside," he said gruffly. "Couldn't sleep?" Evelina smiled faintly. "Nor could I." He hesitated by the fire, then sat in the chair across from her. The silence that followed wasn't awkward this time. It was thick with unspoken memories. After a while, she said softly, "Do you ever wonder how it might have been if things had been different?" "Every day," he admitted. Her throat tightened. "And do you still hate me for it?" He looked at her for a long moment. "I tried to. God knows I tried. But hate's a heavy thing to carry. It turns to something else after a while." "What does it turn to?" He smiled faintly. "Loneliness." The fire cracked softly between them. Evelina's eyes glistened. "Then perhaps we both carried the same thing all these years." Gabriel's expression faltered, vulnerability flashing in his eyes. But before he could reply, a distant sound cut through the night. Hooves, faint at first, then growing louder. Riders approaching through the forest. Gabriel stood instantly, his expression sharpening. "Damn it! Langston's men. Evelina's heart lurched. How did they find us? They must have tracked you from the road. He moved quickly, grabbing his rifle from the wall. Stay inside. Do not move. What will you do? She whispered. What I must. He stepped to the door, checking the shadows beyond. The sound of horses drew closer. 3, maybe 4. Torches flickered faintly through the mist. Gabriel turned back to her, his voice low but steady. If anything happens, run to the river. There's a footpath that leads north. Don't look back. Evelina rose, panic flooding her chest. Gabriel, please, don't face them alone. He gave her a look, half fire, half tenderness. I lost you once because I didn't fight hard enough. I won't make that mistake again. And before she could speak, he stepped out into the night. The door shut behind him with a quiet thud. Evelina stood frozen, the sound of hooves and shouted voices echoing closer, the firelight trembling across the walls. She pressed her hands together, whispering a prayer she had long forgotten. Outside, thunder rolled once more, not from the sky this time, but from the chaos that was about to begin. Chapter 3, A Shelter of Secrets. The night exploded into chaos. Outside the cabin, the clatter of hooves and the crack of gunfire split the silence. Evelina flinched, pressing her hands to her ears. Shouts echoed through the forest. Men's voices, angry and urgent. Spread out, search the river bank. She rushed the window, heart pounding. In the mist, she saw Gabriel's silhouette, broad, defiant, a single figure against the oncoming storm of men and torches. He stood near the river, rifle raised, his coat billowing like a banner in the wind. Turn back, his voice rang out. You'll find nothing here worth your master's wrath. One of the riders laughed cruelly. We've orders from Lord Langston himself, Ashford. Hand over the lady, and no one needs to get hurt. Evelina's stomach twisted. She recognized the voice. Gareth Moore, Langston's steward, a man known for his loyalty and his brutality. Gabriel didn't flinch. If your lord wants her, he'll have to come himself. The riders exchanged glances. Then, without warning, one lifted his pistol. A shot cracked through the air. Evelina screamed. Gabriel dove behind a fallen tree as the bullet shattered the bark beside him. He fired back once, the shot ringing through the night. One of the horses reared, throwing its rider into the mud. The others pulled back, regrouping. Fall back! Gareth shouted. We'll return at dawn. Moments later, the sound of retreating hooves faded into the distance, swallowed by the trees. Evelina burst through the cabin door, running toward Gabriel. Gabriel! He turned, lowering his weapon. Are you hurt? No, but you... Her gaze dropped to the thin line of blood along his temple. You're bleeding. It's nothing. It's not nothing, she said fiercely, reaching for his face. Let me see. He caught her wrist, eyes meeting hers. For a moment, the world held still, the only sound the river rushing behind them. Evelina, he said quietly, you shouldn't have come out. I couldn't just sit and wait while you faced them alone. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You never did know how to obey. She smiled faintly through her tears. And you never did know how to stay out of trouble. He let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. Come, let's get inside before they return. The cabin felt smaller now, the air thick with smoke and adrenaline. Gabriel sat by the fire, a strip of linen pressed to his wound. Evelina knelt beside him, her hands steady despite the trembling in her chest. "Hold still," she murmured, dabbing gently at the blood. He grimaced, but didn't pull away. "You've gotten better at this since last I saw you." "I had to," she replied softly. "My father's temper leaves traces." Gabriel's hand tightened around his knee. "He hurt you? Not in the way you think. Words can bruise just as deeply." His jaw clenched. "If I'd known." "You couldn't have," she interrupted gently. "My life was a performance. Every smile rehearsed, every word chosen. I became exactly what he wanted me to be. Obedient, graceful, empty." Her voice broke on the last word. Gabriel looked at her, his expression softening. "You're not empty," he said quietly. "You never were." Evelina blinked back tears, lowering her gaze. "Sometimes I think he killed the part of me that knew how to hope. Then we'll find it again." The words were simple, but the way he said them made her heart ache. As the fire burned low, they sat in the quiet together. Evelina wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, her mind spinning. "They'll come back," she said softly. "You know they will." Gabriel nodded. "At dawn, Langston won't take this humiliation lightly. Then we should leave before then." He looked up, surprised. "You want to run again?" She met his gaze. "It's not running if we're moving towards something." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "There's a road that leads west, an old hunting trail. If we travel by dawn, we might reach the village before sunset. And after that, we'll decide then." Evelina smiled faintly. "You say that as if you mean to come with me." He hesitated. "You'd never make it alone. Langston's reach is long. So you'll protect me?" she asked softly. He looked away. "Until you find somewhere safe." Her heart twisted. "And after that?" He didn't answer. They prepared in silence. Gabriel gathered provisions, a flask of water, a loaf of bread, a small hunting knife. Evelina changed out of her ruined gown into one of his spare shirts and a wool cloak that hung almost to her ankles. When she caught sight of herself in the cracked mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked freer. When dawn came, pale and cold, they slipped from the cabin. The forest was still damp, the ground soft beneath their boots. Mist curled along the riverbank, and birds called softly from the trees. For hours they walked in silence, keeping close to the undergrowth. Gabriel moved ahead, scanning the path, his rifle slung across his back. Evelina followed, her heart pounding not from fear but from the nearness of him, the way he carried himself, the quiet strength in his stride. It wasn't until midday that he finally spoke. "Tell me something, Evelina." She glanced at him. "What? Why Langston?" She hesitated. "Because my father owed him money, because he offered protection and influence, because I was too frightened to fight back." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "You deserved better." "I thought so once," she said softly. "But the world doesn't always give us what we deserve, only what we're willing to take." He looked at her then, really looked, and she felt the air shift between them. "You've changed," he said. "So have you." He smiled faintly. "How so?" "You used to laugh more. Now you watch the world like a man, expecting it to strike." "Perhaps I am. Perhaps I am too." Their eyes met briefly before they both looked away, the silence between them deep and full of old longing. By late afternoon, the forest began to thin. In the distance, Evelina saw the faint outline of rooftops. Alps, a small village nestled beside the hills. Relief fluttered in her chest. There, Gabriel said quietly, if we can reach the inn before nightfall, you'll be safe. Evelina frowned. And you? I'll head north after. It's better that way. She stopped walking. Better for whom? For you? Don't decide that for me, Gabriel. He turned to face her. You don't understand. Langston won't stop. As long as you're with me, you're in danger. I was in danger the moment I was born a Harcourt, she said bitterly. You can't protect me from that. He took a step closer, his eyes hard with emotion. Then what do you want from me, Evelina? Tell me and I'll give it. She met his gaze, her voice barely a whisper. I want you not to leave me again. For a heartbeat, neither breathed. Then slowly Gabriel lifted his hand to her face. His fingers brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, his touch gentle but trembling. You have no idea, he said softly, how long I've waited to hear that. Her breath caught. Then don't make me say it twice. For a moment he looked as if he might kiss her. His gaze lingered on her lips, his thumb tracing the edge of her jaw. But then, just as suddenly, he stepped back. I can't. Evelina blinked, stunned. Why? Because if I start, I won't stop, and you deserve more than what's left of me. Tears welled in her eyes. What's left of you is all I ever wanted. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. Don't, Evelina, please. But his voice broke on the word please, and that was all the truth she needed. They reached the village by sunset. It was small and quiet, cobblestone streets, smoke rising from cottage chimneys, the scent of bread and wet earth in the air. Gabriel led her to a modest inn at the edge of the square. Inside, the innkeeper greeted them with a wary smile. You've come far, travelers. Need a room? Yes, Gabriel said. 1 room, 2 beds. Evelina's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. The room was simple, wooden floor, 2 narrow beds, a small hearth that flickered with warmth. Evelina sank onto one of the beds, exhaustion finally overtaking her. Gabriel lit a lamp and set it by the window. You should rest. I'll keep watch tonight. She nodded faintly. You never sleep, do you? Not easily. Because of me? He looked at her, the lamplight catching the silver in his eyes. Because of what we lost? She opened her mouth to reply, but a knock at the door cut her off. Gabriel moved instantly, hand to his weapon. Who is it? Message for Lady Harcourt, came a muffled voice. Evelina froze. Gabriel motioned for silence, then cracked the door open slightly. A boy stood there, no older than 10, holding a sealed envelope. From a gentleman, sir, the boy said nervously. He said it were urgent. Gabriel took the letter, slipped the boy a coin, and shut the door. Then he looked at Evelina. Did you tell anyone where we were going? She shook her head. No one. He broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of parchment. The handwriting was elegant, familiar, and cold. Evelina's blood ran cold. He knows. Gabriel folded the letter carefully, his jaw tightening. Then we move before dawn. He's tracking us. But how? There's only one way. Someone close to your family is helping him. Evelina's mind raced. Martha, my maid. She must have told him when I fled. He nodded grimly. Then Langston won't stop until he has you, or until someone stops him. She looked up at him, fear and resolve warring in her eyes. Then perhaps it's time we stop running. Gabriel met her gaze, something fierce flickering behind his calm exterior. "Evelina, what are you thinking?" She straightened, her voice steady. "That I've lived my whole life obeying men like him. My father, Langston, even you once. No more. If he wants me, let him come. But I'll not hide while he hunts me." He stared at her, a slow smile curving his lips, not mocking but proud. "There's the woman I remember." She smiled faintly. "You said we'd find my hope again. Perhaps this is it." He exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Then we fight, but not alone. I have friends, men who still owe me favors. We'll make our stand." Outside, the wind shifted, rattling the shutters. The night beyond was dark, but inside, for the first time in years, Evelina felt something stronger than fear, hope, and beside it, love, fierce and undeniable. That night, as Gabriel took his place by the window, and Evelina lay awake watching the flicker of firelight, she thought of everything that had brought them here, the lies, the loss, the pain, and of everything yet to come. The storm had not passed, but for the first time, she no longer feared it, because she was no longer running alone. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Past. The morning broke cold and pale, with frost kissing the window panes of the small village inn. Evelina woke to the sound of the hearth crackling and the faint rustle of movement beside her. Gabriel was already dressed, his coat buttoned, his expression distant. "You didn't sleep," she said softly, sitting up. He glanced at her, a hint of a smile ghosting across his lips. "Old habits die hard." "Because of the letter?" He nodded, folding a map across the table. "Langston's men are closing in faster than I expected. If we stay, they'll find us before nightfall." Evelina rose, pulling her cloak tight. "Then we leave." He hesitated, watching her with an intensity that made her heartbeat stutter. "Are you certain? There's no turning back after this. Once we move against Langston, you'll be branded a traitor to your own family." "My family lost me long ago," she said firmly, "when they sold my future for their debts." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then we ride." They left the village quietly, slipping through the misty morning streets as shopkeepers opened shutters and the scent of bread filled the air. Gabriel led a borrowed mare. Evelina rode behind him, her arms around his waist, the rhythmic beat of the horse's hooves steady beneath them. Hours passed in silence. The sun climbed higher, cutting through the fog, revealing the rolling countryside, golden fields, stone walls, and the faint shimmer of a distant manor on the hill. Evelina's eyes lingered on it. "I know that place." Gabriel followed her gaze. "You should. It's your father's hunting lodge." She froze. "You brought us here?" "It's the last place Langston will expect you to return, and there's something you need to see." Her pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer, only urged the horse forward. The lodge stood silent and abandoned, its shutters drawn, ivy crawling over the stone walls. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and somewhere in the distance a hawk cried out. Gabriel dismounted, offering her a hand. "Stay close." Inside, dust coated the furniture. Sunlight filtered through cracks in the shutters, falling in golden ribbons across the faded rugs. Evelina shivered. It felt like stepping into a memory. "This was where we said goodbye," she whispered. He nodded, his expression unreadable, "and where the truth began to rot." "What truth?" Gabriel walked toward the hearth and knelt, prying loose a loose stone in the wall. Behind it lay a small tin box, tarnished with age. He lifted it out and handed it to her. Evelina frowned. "What is this?" "Open it." Her fingers trembled as she unlatched the lid. Inside, tied with a faded blue ribbon, were letters, dozens of them, some yellowed with time, others still sealed. Her breath caught. "My name," she whispered, tracing the delicate script across each envelope. "You wrote to me every week," Gabriel said quietly. "For nearly a year." Her eyes filled with tears. "I never received a single one." "I know," he said. "Your father made sure of it." Evelina sank into a chair, the letters shaking in her hands. "He told me you'd gone to London and married an heiress, that you'd written to say you regretted ever meeting me." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "He sent me away, said if I didn't leave Harcourt lands, he'd ruin what was left of my family's name. When I refused, he had me arrested under false charges of debt. I spent 6 months in debtor's prison before my cousin secured my release." Evelina's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God. When I got out, I came here," Gabriel continued, his voice rough, "to this lodge. I thought if I left the letters, somehow, you'd find them." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "All this time I thought you'd forgotten me." He looked at her, pain flickering across his face. "And I thought you'd moved on." She broke the ribbon and unfolded one of the letters. The ink had faded, but the words still breathed with life. "My dearest Evelina, if love alone could breach the distance between us, I would have been at your door long ago, but I am trapped by a world that despises men who love beyond their station. Still, I dream of you, your laughter, your fire, your eyes when you defy me and make me love you more for it. If you ever doubt me, look to the river at dawn. There, you'll always find me waiting." Evelina pressed the paper to her chest, sobbing quietly. Gabriel stepped closer, his voice soft. "You were the reason I survived that prison. Every day I wrote another letter. Every day I hoped you'd answer." "I would have," she whispered, "1,000 times." He knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Then we've both been prisoners, Evelina. Only mine had bars of iron, and yours were made of silk." She met his gaze, her tears shining like glass. "I don't want to be bound anymore." "Then don't be," he said gently. "Not by him, not by your name, not even by me." For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind moving through the trees outside, whispering through the cracks in the walls. They spent the afternoon going through the letters, piece by piece. Every confession, every promise, every heartbreak sealed in ink. Evelina read until her eyes blurred, until her heart ached with the weight of all the years stolen from them. When she reached the last one, she hesitated. The seal was broken, the handwriting unsteady. "Evelina, they're coming for me tonight. I've been warned that your father intends to have me taken away. If this is the end, know that I do not regret loving you, not for one breath, one heartbeat. You were my light in a dark world. If ever you remember me, remember that I loved you without condition. Yours, always, Gabriel." Her voice broke on the last word. She looked up to find him watching her, his eyes shadowed but burning. "That was the last one I wrote before they came," he said. "After that, I didn't know if I'd live to write another." Evelina rose from her chair, crossing the room in 2 quick steps. She reached for his hand, clutching it tightly. "You did live," she whispered, "and so did I. And perhaps that means we were meant to find our way back." He stared down at her, his breath uneven. Don't make promises you can't keep. I've broken enough of those, she said, her voice trembling. I mean this one. For a moment the air between them was charged, alive. His hand came up to her face, tracing the path of a tear with his thumb. Evelina, she leaned closer, her eyes locked on his. Say my name again. He did, and in that whisper, the years between them fell away. Their lips met. Slow, searching, desperate. The kiss was not gentle. It was the culmination of everything they had lost and everything they dared to hope for again. When they finally parted, Evelina's forehead rested against his. Now what? She murmured. He exhaled, his voice low. Now we prepare for war. They worked through the evening, gathering what they could. Gabriel found his old weapons hidden beneath the floorboards. Evelina packed the letters carefully into her satchel. As the light faded, he lit a single lantern and spread a map across the table. Langston's estate lies 3 miles east, he said, pointing. He'll keep your father close. Old allies, old debts. If we can get to him before Langston realizes we're near, we might have leverage. You mean to face him? He looked at her steadily. I mean to end this. Evelina hesitated, fear flickering in her chest. And if it goes wrong, then we'll burn his empire with us. She swallowed hard, then nodded. I'll go with you. Gabriel frowned. No, it's too dangerous. I'm the reason this began, she said firmly, and I'll be the one to finish it. He stared at her, then sighed. You truly haven't changed. I have, she said softly. I've become the woman you once told me I could be. His gaze softened. Then God help Langston. Later, as the night deepened, they sat together by the fire. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the crackle of flames and the scent of smoke and pine. Gabriel, Evelina said quietly, what will you do when this is over? He looked into the fire. I haven't thought that far ahead. Then think of it now. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. What would you have me say? That I dream of peace, of a cottage by the sea, of you beside me every morning? Her heart ached. If that's what you want, then say it. He smiled faintly, a trace of sadness in his eyes. It's what I've always wanted, but I learned long ago that dreams and survival rarely walk the same road. She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his. Then let's prove the world wrong. He didn't answer, but his grip tightened. For a long while they sat like that. 2 souls who had spent too many years apart, now bound by a fragile, burning hope. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of thunder in the distance. The storm was returning, but this time, Evelina was ready to face it. Chapter 5. The Price of Love. The city rose before them like a monster of smoke and stone. By the time Gabriel and Evelina reached its edge, dusk had already fallen. Gas lamps glowed along the narrow streets, their light trembling in the fog. Carriages rattled past, wheels splashing through puddles, and the air smelled of rain, horse, and coal. Evelina drew her cloak tighter around her shoulders. It feels colder than I remember. Gabriel glanced at her. That's because you've been gone too long. She smiled faintly. And you, have you missed it? His eyes hardened as he stared ahead. London has long memories, none of them kind. They made their way through the winding streets. keeping to the shadows. Gabriel led her down an alleyway behind a row of warehouses, then into a small brick building with a faded sign that read The Anchor and Crown. Inside, the tavern was dimly lit, filled with the low murmur of voices. The scent of tobacco and ale hung thick in the air. As they entered, a few heads turned, but only one man stood. "Gabriel Ashford," the stranger said, grinning. "I thought the gallows had claimed you by now." Gabriel smiled thinly. "You'll have to forgive me for disappointing you, Oliver." The man laughed, clapping him on the shoulder. "You never did know how to die properly." Then his gaze fell on Evelina, and his grin faded to curiosity. "And this must be the lady I've heard whispers of?" Evelina inclined her head gracefully. "Lady Evelina Harcourt." Oliver's brows lifted. "The runaway bride herself." Gabriel shot him a warning look. "Enough." Oliver held up his hands in surrender. All right. I see you're not here for pleasantries. What is it you need?" "Information," Gabriel said. "Langston, I need to know where he's keeping Harcourt and who he's bribed within the magistrate's office." Oliver's expression sobered. "You're walking a dangerous path, friend. Langston's reach goes deep. He's bought half the City Watch, and the other half's afraid of him. He's holed up at his estate near Mayfair, heavily guarded. Word is, he's preparing to make a very public example of someone." Evelina's stomach turned. "Me?" Oliver hesitated, then nodded. "A notice went out this morning. He's calling it an appeal to virtue, claiming you were abducted by Ashford against your will. He's rallying support to have Gabriel tried for abduction and assault." Gabriel's expression darkened. "He's painting me as a criminal." "He's always been good at that," Oliver said grimly. "You'll need proof. Something undeniable to turn the tide." Evelina's hand trembled slightly. "Proof like the letters?" Gabriel looked at her sharply. "No, those are personal. They're the only evidence we have that my father and Langston conspired to destroy you. They show his lies, his cruelty. If we make them public, the world will see the truth." Oliver frowned. "You'd be risking everything, my lady. Once those letters are out, there's no going back. You'd ruin your family's name." Evelina lifted her chin, then let it burn. For a long moment, the room was silent. Then Gabriel spoke softly. "You've grown stronger than I ever imagined." She smiled faintly. "Perhaps I learned from you." That night, Gabriel and Evelina sat in a small rented room above the tavern. Rain pattered softly against the window, and the sounds of the city drifted up from below. Laughter, wheels, the faint song of a violin somewhere far away. Evelina sat by the hearth, sorting through the bundle of letters. Her hands shook as she spread them across the table. "These are the pieces of us," she murmured. "Every word you ever wrote, every lie they stole." Gabriel sat beside her, his expression tight. "Once we reveal them, you'll have no place left among them. No home, no title. I lost those long before I met you," she said quietly. "All I ever wanted was truth." He watched her for a long moment, then reached out, his hand covering hers. "Then truth you shall have." By dawn, the plan was set. Oliver would deliver the letters to the London Gazette, the most widely read paper in the city. Once printed, the scandal would spread like wildfire. Gabriel and Evelina, meanwhile, would confront Langston and her father directly, forcing them into the light before the public could shape the story for them. As the sun rose over the city, painting the rooftops in pale gold, Gabriel checked his pistol and fastened his sword to his belt. "Are you ready?" he asked. Evelina met his gaze, her eyes steady. "For the first time in my life." Langston's townhouse in Mayfair was a palace of marble and malice. Guards flanked the gate, their muskets gleaming in the morning light. Evelina's heart pounded as she and Gabriel approached, cloaked and hooded. When the guards moved to block them, Gabriel stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. "Tell your master Gabriel Ashford is here to return what was never his." The guards exchanged wary glances before one disappeared inside. Moments later, the heavy doors opened. Langston stood at the top of the stairs, every inch the nobleman, tall, silver-haired and smiling like a viper. Beside him, her father, Lord Harcourt, looked older, thinner, his face lined with guilt Evelina had never seen before. "Ah," Langston said smoothly. "The prodigal lovers return." Evelina threw back her hood. "You lied," she said coldly, "to my father, to society, to everyone. You ruined a man's life for your debts." Langston chuckled. "My dear girl, I saved your family from ruin. You were a debt repaid, a bride of convenience. I was never yours to claim, weren't you?" His gaze raked over her with calculated cruelty. "You wore my ring." Gabriel's voice cut through the air, sharp as steel, and she threw it away. Langston's smile faltered. "Careful, Ashford. You've already been accused of kidnapping and coercion. Another outburst, and I'll see you hanged." "Then hang me," Gabriel said quietly. "But first, look at what your lies have brought you." He drew a folded page from his coat, the first of the letters, and tossed it at Langston's feet. Langston glanced at it, then at Evelina. "What is this nonsense?" "Your undoing," she said. Her father bent to pick up the letter. His hands shook as his eyes scanned the familiar handwriting. "These are Gabriel's words. The ones you told me never reached her." Langston's face turned to stone. "She's lying." "No," Evelina said fiercely. "You are. You stole our letters, imprisoned him, and sold me to pay your debts. But now the truth is out." Langston's composure cracked for the first time. "You fool," he hissed at her father. "You told her nothing?" Lord Harcourt's eyes filled with tears. "You said it was for her own good, that Ashford was beneath her." Langston struck him across the face. "You were always weak." Gabriel lunged forward, grabbing Langston by the collar. "And you've always been a coward." Guards surged forward, but Evelina's voice rang out above them all. "The Gazette has the letters. By sundown, the whole of London will know the truth. You can kill us, but you'll never silence what's already begun." Langston froze, realization dawning. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." For a long, taut moment, no one moved. Then slowly, Langston's hand went to his pistol. "Then, if I am ruined," he said coldly, "you'll die with me." He raised the weapon, aimed not at Evelina, but at Gabriel. The shot rang out like thunder. Evelina screamed as Gabriel staggered backward, the force of the bullet throwing him against the marble column. "Gabriel!" she cried, rushing to him. He was still breathing, blood seeping through his coat. Langston cocked the pistol again, but before he could fire, Lord Harcourt stepped between them. "Enough!" he shouted. "You've done enough harm, Langston." Langston sneered. "Stand aside, old man. I said, enough!" A second shot echoed through the hall. Langston's eyes widened, his pistol falling from his hand. He looked down, blood blooming across his chest. Slowly, He crumpled to the floor. Evelina turned in shock. Her father stood trembling, pistol still raised. "I had to," he whispered, voice breaking. "For her." The house fell silent. Guards fled. Servants whispered prayers in corners. Evelina knelt beside Gabriel, pressing her hands against the wound. "Stay with me, please." He managed a faint smile. "You always were dramatic. Don't speak." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "If this is the price of loving you, then I pay it gladly." "No," she choked out. "You're not allowed to die. Not now. Not after everything." He closed his eyes, his breath shallow. "Then kiss me once more, and I'll try to obey." Her tears fell onto his lips as she kissed him, desperate, trembling, filled with every word she'd never said. When she pulled back, his eyes were open again, faintly amused, despite the pain. "Still stubborn, always," she whispered. By evening, the city was ablaze with rumor. The Gazette's special edition hit the streets. "Lord Langston exposed in scandal. Lady Harcourt's letters reveal plot of deception." Society reeled. The Langston name was finished. The Harcourts fell from grace. But Evelina did not weep. For the first time she felt free. Gabriel recovered slowly, his wound healing under her care in a small house outside the city. Weeks passed. The winter thawed into spring, and every morning when the light touched his face, Evelina remembered the man she had once lost, and now refused to lose again. One afternoon, as she was tending the small garden, she heard the soft creak of the door. Gabriel stepped outside, pale but standing strong, his cane tapping softly on the stones. "You shouldn't be up," she scolded gently. He smiled faintly. "You sound like a wife." She froze, then turned to him. "And if I wish to be?" He looked at her for a long moment, the wind catching the edges of his coat. "Then, my lady, I would count myself the luckiest man alive." Her lips trembled into a smile. "Then stop calling me my lady." He took her hand, his voice rough with emotion. "Evelina, will you?" She pressed a finger to his lips. "Don't ask, just kiss me." And he did, softly this time, with the gentleness of a man who had learned what it meant to lose and live again. Chapter 6. The Kiss. She owed him. The wind carried the scent of spring and the sound of the river. Evelina stood at the edge of the meadow where it all began, where she had first seen him again beneath the grey English sky, when she still wore grief like armor. The years between then and now felt both infinite and small, like a dream that refused to end. Behind her, the small house nestled between the trees glowed with the last light of dusk. Smoke curled from the chimney. A life, fragile, hard-won, and theirs, breathed quietly inside. She closed her eyes, the memory washing over her. The river had been swollen that day, wild with rain. He had stood there, drenched and furious, shouting her name as if he could call back 10 years of silence. And she, proud, broken, terrified, had stood on the opposite bank, unable to move. Now he stood there again. Gabriel. He looked stronger, though the cane at his side still betrayed the wound that nearly took him. His coat was dark, his hair longer, his expression unreadable, until he saw her turn. Then the hardness broke. He smiled, and the world fell away. "Evelina," he said softly as he approached. "You'll catch cold standing out here." She laughed lightly. "You always said that. I was always right." She turned toward him fully, the fading sunlight painting her hair with gold. "You're walking better," he shrugged. "Mostly out of spite? Against whom? Death, fate, possibly you?" She smiled faintly. "Then I shall consider myself flattered. He stopped beside her, hands clasped behind his back, eyes tracing the horizon. "Do you ever think," he said quietly, "about how different it all might have been if you hadn't come back that day?" "Every day," she admitted. "And do you regret it?" She looked up at him, eyes shining with something fierce and tender. "No, because if I hadn't, I would still be wearing black for a man who wasn't dead, only lost." He turned to her slowly. "And now," she met his gaze, "now I've found him again." The silence that followed was soft, not empty, the kind of silence that only exists between two people who have already said everything that mattered. Finally, Gabriel spoke. "Oliver's gone north. He says the Gazette won't print another word about us. The scandal's already burned itself out." Evelina nodded. "Let it. We've nothing left to prove." He studied her, the faintest trace of amusement in his eyes. "You're calm about it all." "I've spent a decade being a ghost," she said. "It's strangely freeing to live as a woman instead." He reached for her hand, hesitating only a heartbeat before his fingers brushed hers. "You've changed, Evelina," she smiled sadly. "So have you. The world tried to break us both. It failed." They walked together along the river bank, the grass brushing against their boots, the water whispering beside them. Gabriel stopped where the earth dipped low toward the water, the very place where, months ago, she had found him bleeding between life and death, love and vengeance. "I remember this place," he murmured. "So do I." He turned toward her. "You once said this river took everything from you." She nodded. "It did. And now," she glanced down at the reflection of the sky on the rippling surface, "now I think it gave me everything back." He smiled faintly. "You always did have a way of finding grace in ruin. And you," she said softly, "always had a way of bringing ruin to grace." He laughed, the sound low and real. "Then perhaps we balance each other." "Perhaps," she said, "or perhaps we're just both very bad at giving up." He looked at her then, truly looked. The wind lifted her hair, her eyes caught the gold of sunset, and for a moment he saw not the widow, not the runaway bride, not the scandal, only the woman he had written letters to in the dark, the woman he had dreamed of through prison walls, the woman he had bled for and would bleed for again. "Do you remember," he said, "the last thing I wrote to you before they took me?" Her breath caught every word. He nodded slowly. "I wrote, 'If you ever find me again, I will not ask for your forgiveness, only for one kiss, the one you owed me when the world ended.'" She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "And now that you've found me," his voice was barely a whisper, "now I'm here to collect it." She took a step toward him, then another. The distance between them, 10 years of grief, a lifetime of longing, vanished like mist. When she finally stopped, she was so close she could feel the warmth of his breath, smell the faint trace of rain on his coat. Her voice trembled. "You're certain that's all you want?" "No," he said hoarsely, "but it's all I'll ask for." Her hand rose slowly, touching his face, the faint scar along his jaw, the shadow of stubble, the heat of life beneath her fingertips. "Then take it," she whispered. He did. The kiss was not gentle. It was not careful. It was 10 years of silence breaking open, fierce, desperate, alive. The river roared beside them. The sky burned red with sunset. And somewhere in that endless sound, the ghosts that had haunted them both finally fell quiet. When they broke apart, Her forehead rested against his. "You're trembling," he murmured. "So are you?" He smiled against her skin. "Then perhaps we're both still alive." She laughed softly, the sound catching between them. "You were right," she said. "That day by the river, the world did end." "And this?" he asked. "This," she whispered, "is what comes after." Later that evening, they sat on the grass watching the first stars appear. The air was cool, the kind of cool that makes you draw closer without thinking. Gabriel leaned back, eyes tracing the constellations. "Do you ever think of what comes next?" She smiled faintly. "Every day, and yet I find I no longer need to plan. The future feels less like something to conquer and more like something to walk into, one breath at a time." He nodded. "Strange, isn't it? We spent so long fighting for a life neither of us knew how to live. And now, he said, "I think I just want to live quietly, to wake up and find you there, to stop running." Evelina's heart softened. "You'll never stop running, Gabriel. It's who you are." He looked at her then, eyes bright with something that wasn't quite sorrow. "Then at least I'll run toward you." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "That would be a first." He laughed, a real laugh, the kind she hadn't heard since before the world went mad. Weeks passed. The rhythm of their days settled into something tender and ordinary, a shared life stitched together by routine, breakfast by the window, long walks through the fields, nights by the fire where silence said everything words could not. Once the simplicity would have frightened them both. Now it felt like mercy. One afternoon, a letter arrived, not from the Gazette, not from society, but from Oliver. "Heard rumors you're still alive, old friend. Miracles never cease. The world's already forgotten the scandal. Perhaps that's its only kindness. If you ever come to London again, there's work waiting. Honest work this time. Until then, take care of her. You've both earned the peace you once thought you didn't deserve." Gabriel folded the letter slowly. Evelina watched him. "Will you go?" He shook his head. "No, I've done my fighting. Let someone else take up the sword." "And what will you do instead?" He smiled faintly. "Whatever makes you smile." That evening, as twilight deepened, Evelina stepped outside once more. The river shimmered with moonlight. She could see her reflection, and for the first time in years, she didn't look haunted. Behind her, Gabriel's voice drifted softly through the open doorway. "Come inside, it's late." "In a moment," she called. He joined her anyway, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "Still defiant," he murmured. "Still yours," she answered. He kissed the top of her head. "You know," he said quietly, "for years I thought love was something that had to be fought for, something violent and desperate. And now I think love is what remains when the war is over." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "Then let it remain." They stood there as the night deepened, two souls who had lost everything and somehow found more. In the distance, the church bell tolled once, a single sound, a mark of time moving forward. Evelina closed her eyes, whispering into the quiet. "Do you think they'll remember us?" Gabriel's hand tightened around hers. "No, and that's the point," she smiled. "Then let them forget." And together, they walked back toward the small house, the door closing softly behind them. Not an ending, but a beginning. The river kept whispering their story long after the world had ceased to listen. Years later, when travelers passed through the countryside, they sometimes spoke of a small house by the river where a woman with golden hair and a man with a cane lived quietly among the wild flowers. No one knew their names, no one asked, but on certain spring evenings when the light caught the water just right, they could be seen walking together, two silhouettes against the dusk, hand in hand, as if love itself had refused to die.